Hi and welcome to Programming Percy. Today we will be talking about how to structure your domain-driven design architecture in an application or in a Go project. And if you haven't watched my previous video or read my article about domain-driven design, I recommend you to, because we will be using the code we created in that video to refactor it a little bit to have a much better architectural structure. So if you haven't, I really recommend you go see that video first. We will be working on that code. Now, in this video, we will be restructuring that repository and we will remove all the naming. In that video, we named everything for what it is, like the customer aggregate was in an aggregate package. I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying it's confusing as hell, because then you have your customer repository, you have your customer aggregate, and everything gets mumble jumbled. So the first thing that I do recommend us to do is that we will be moving the aggregates into their own domain packages. So we have learned what an aggregate is, we have learned what rules apply to them. So we don't really necessarily have to name the package aggregate. So I tend to usually place my aggregates inside their respective domain package. So we have the customer domain. Everything related to the customer should go inside here. So let's place the aggregate inside there as well. So I'm gonna go ahead. You see the structure we have right here. It's kind of messy. It's hard to follow what's what. So let's go ahead and let's grab the customers and let's copy those. And let's instead place them inside the root customer domain. Now we're gonna get a lot of errors doing that. So let's go ahead. Let's see if we can refactor a little bit. So this is the package customer, and again the same with the test file, which will be customer test instead. Also, we need to replace all the aggregate.error invalid persons to instead customer. So everything basically that's related to the customer we will need to replace. So I'm just going to go ahead, do customer instead for all of those. And let's see if we can get a little bit. We need to fix the import, so it should be domain customer instead, and we don't have to have that. So that fixes the test file. Let's go ahead and check this file. Everything's fine. The repository, we're still saying that everything is aggregates. So you just go ahead and remove and return customer, since we're in the same package now. So that makes it a lot easier for the customer, and it makes more sense. We have the customer domain, we have our aggregate inside, and it's just a lot more easier to kind of see what's going on. So we will be fixing these as well. We will do customer, new customer. Just fix every reference to customer that still uses the aggregate package should instead be using the customer. So basically search for aggregate. Okay, that's the product. So let's see, what is it complaining about? Right, so that's one thing that we will probably change very soon. We will do more refactoring. So while we're at it, let's see what the error is. We're gonna have a lot of errors. So inside here, it's saying we don't have an aggregate, which makes sense because it should be customer. So basically all aggregates should be replaced with customers. We can remove the import. Again, same thing goes for all files. Let's just customer package instead. Okay, we couldn't rename that. I have no idea why. Let's go ahead and do a regular copy then. Let's not do that. It didn't like that as well. Let's just manually do this. My editor failed me. Or I fail my editor. I don't know which way to put it. So let's go ahead. Let's just replace all the customer stuff. There's no such thing anymore. It should be customer.customer, which makes a hell of a lot of more sense. The same thing inside MongoDB. Let's just remove the import. Let's go ahead, aggregate.customer. Let's see, let's just replace all the aggregates to customer.customer. And we are now almost finished. That should also be customer.customer. So we have replaced the customer, but let's do the same thing for the product. The product should go inside the product domain. We can go ahead, completely remove the whole aggregate folder. And now, of course, we also need to change that we don't use the aggregate anymore. We're going to use the product. So all aggregates gonna be product instead. Product. Let's go here. It's complaining that there's no such package, and that's because we have conflicting package names. So let's go replace that to products. So remove all mentions of aggregate and replace them with product instead. Same thing for the customer. Once we've done that, we should have, okay, yeah, right, my bad, we're in the same package. We don't need to reference it that way. So, and finally, remove the aggregate. There's no such thing. Again, aggregate should be product. And let's remove mentions of, let's completely wipe the aggregate package. Everything is inside their own domain. So great. Once we've done that, we've tidied up a little bit of the code smell that we had. And I'm a little bit more pleased with this. However, we still have a little bit to do. We do have we can close those. We do have the entity and the value objects. And it's not wrong having them in separate packages, so we don't have cyclical imports and stuff. But we can sort of fix this in other ways. So they are actually related to the Tavern domain. And the Tavern domain is the package that we're building. So one way to achieve this is moving them into the root package instead. So I'm just going to go ahead, move them into the root package. Or if you have entities that relates to another domain, you could place them in that domain. We could have a Tavern domain inside the domain folder, for instance. I'm going to go ahead and delete the entity and the value object folder. So we have less of those. I'm going to go ahead and rename the package to Tavern. This is the core domain, so I think it's fairly reasonable that we have a Tavern package at the root level. Now, of course, everywhere we mention these entities, it's going to complain, so we should refactor that as well. And instead of entities, we're gonna go ahead and re-reference to the Tavern. So it should be instead Tavern package. I'm gonna go ahead and also change the Go mod. So I'm gonna change the module to Tavern instead of Go DDD. It's just so that we can reference the Tavern.item instead, because we don't want to have it Go DDD. This is a Tavern. So all mentions of entity should be replaced with Tavern. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And once we have done that, we will have a lot less. Let's go ahead and do entity, and entity is going to be replaced with Tavern. I'm just going to go up, replace everything. We can close some of my files. And let's see. Oh, we also, since we changed the module name, I'm just going to go ahead and replace all those into Percy Ballmer Tavern. Just replace all occurrences. There's no reason to keep the DDD name. That was just to learn a little bit about it. We can remove value object. And let's see, we have some more issues. Value object should instead be Tavern, of course. So all the value objects we will replace with Tavern. And we can fix that import. Right. So what I've done is I've renamed the module into whatever you want it to. I just thought DDD was a bad name. And we have removed the entity and the value object folders and instead put them in the core domain or the root domain. So instead we have persons inside the Tavern. You could have those in other domains. You could have persons, you could have an entity domain, for instance. I just like having them in the root so it's easy to find them. So one other thing that we can do, now that we've cleaned up a little bit, we can start splitting the service packages. Right now there is one service containing both our services. Well, to be fair, it'd make a little bit more sense if we did a new folder, for instance, folder for order and one for the Tavern. The reason is that as the project grows, it will just be a lot nicer to have the services divided into smaller packages. In my opinion, it can become quite bloated if you store them all in the same package, because there tend to be helper functions or small functions that does a little bit of that, and it just keeps growing. And I just like splitting things up so it's a lot easier to maintain and see what's what. So let's go ahead and just put the files inside the correct folder. Let's go order, we want to move them, and let's do the same thing for the Tavern. Let's move them into the Tavern folder. And then now, of course, it's going to be a little bit aggressive with us. It's going to say that it doesn't like this. So new order service comes from the order. So we need to kind of fetch that. So let's import that Tavern and services. And we are getting the order service. And we, of course, need to rename that package to order. Same goes for the test file, should be in the order. And same for the Tavern, so rename them to their appropriate terms. We have the Tavern. Now, all mentions of order service has to be to the order package instead. So I'm gonna go ahead again and just services, order. So we fix that, and again, order service. So let's see. We have renamed the services. We now have the order service and the Tavern service separately, which is nice. Let's just fix this. The init products no longer exists. So init products is part of the order test. So for now, to skip any errors, I'm just going to go ahead and copy that for a little bit. And let's also fix something else. So right here we see we're complaining there's no such customer repository. It's because it's inside the order right now, and the with memory production is also inside the order instead. So we have to fix those. Now we're going to have one error, and now it really complains that we cannot use order service.customers anymore because now we're not in the same package. This is not an exported field, so we will need to add a new function to the order service. And the order service will get a function called add customer. This is actually a good thing because previously we assumed that the user knew how to add a customer using the unexported field service, but we shouldn't do that. So we should make it perfectly clear what's going on. So we do create a sort of wrapper function around it which exposes the functionality, and we return an error. So what we will do here is that we will do the same thing that we did before. So we will kind of create a new customer for the user, and we will do UUID. Let's return a UUID nil because we don't have a UUID if something goes wrong, and return the error. So now we will add to the repository customers.add. So previously we expected the users to know about this, which doesn't make really much sense because that's it's nested inside customers and then add. So instead we, on the service level, have the functionality exposed in an understandable way. So let's go ahead and let's return nil as soon as anything is errors. And then once we have succeeded, let's return a valid ID and nil. Now we can go back to the tests because we need to add or update, so we use the add customers instead. So let's go ahead and remove this part where we kind of assume that they know how to create and add customers. So instead we will do UUID and os.addCustomer to call that function, which wraps the functionality for us, and let's just fatal when something goes wrong. Let's just fatal. So instead of doing all that calling to the repositories externally, we have wrapped them in the service to make it easier. So the service should wrap the functionality and only expose what we want to expose, and that makes it a lot easier to use also. So let's go ahead, and we're not having the customer anymore, we're using the UID that is passed in. So if we take a look now, it's a lot cleaner. It's a lot cleaner than we previously had. I really like this approach much more. One thing that we could even do is, right now we're calling the customer.customer repository. It's a bit much. Previously, when we store them in the same package, that made sense. Now, having customer.customer repository doesn't make much sense. So I'm gonna go ahead and rename that to just repository, because anybody who uses the customer.repository, it's pretty self-explanatory that it's a repository. So, we could go ahead and do the same thing for the product repository. We could name it repository. And it just makes a lot more sense whenever you go, so in here, whenever you go like customer repository, looks a lot better than customer.customer repository. So that's just a small change to the naming, and it's only possible if you split, because if you name it repository and you have like 5 of them, they can't be named the same, of course, but these generic names, it will be hard. But if they are prefixed with their domain, it should make sense. So, I mean, we've changed everything. We have everything in place. So now we also have the Tavern here. So, how to run this? So, many of my projects I use the CMD. I use Cobra a lot. So I'm kind of used to having the CMD package. So I'm gonna go ahead and do main.go. You could place this. You could place these files in a Tavern domain and store them there instead if you want to have the regular main. Doesn't really matter according to me. So inside CMD main, let's go ahead and write a little Tavern where we use it. So we have the Tavern in place. Let's go ahead and do a... You guys remember the init products? I'm just gonna make a small modification to that. And let's call it product inventory. So this is just an example now. You should load the inventory from the product repository in a real application. So let's go ahead. I'm just gonna replace all those with panics instead. So, alright, my bad. I have a syntax error here. So this little function here is just going to be returning the products for us, and we're going to call it up here. So inventory. So let's rename that inventory like that. So we have the products. Let's go ahead and create our server. So I'm going to do a new order service, and we will have a customer repository going back and using a MongoDB localhost, and we also want to use a product repository, and we're going to use the products we have generated. And let's see if error isn't nil. Let's panic. So it complains here because I have the wrong function. Let's do with Mongo customer repository and accepts a input string and also the context. So let's go ahead and just use a background context for now. And once that's done, we have the order service in place. We can go ahead and generate the Tavern. So we will do Tavern dot new Tavern, and again the Tavern accepts the order service, so it will be Tavern with order service. Pass in our order service. You can pass in the billing, whatever you want. That's how you scale it. You add more services. So we have our Tavern. We can go ahead and do UID. Let's call the order service. Let's add a customer, and let's check if there's any errors. Now let's create a new order, and let's pass in a beer again. I want to order a beer. So let's see, tavern.order. Now we pass in the UID of my user, and we pass in my order, and we check if there's any errors, or else we panic. So I'm gonna go ahead and see, we have some it's using the wrong UUID again. My editor has some real problems finding their Google one, even though I always use the Google one. So the Tavern is complete. We have a main file which will connect to a MongoDB, and it will execute an order. So that's really nice. I'm gonna go ahead and just run a simple Docker container with Mongo, and let's call it DDD, and let's use the latest tag. It should be a semicolon. So we have the Mongo up and running. So let's go ahead and remove that, and let's go into the CMD folder. And inside here I will do go run main.go, which will execute an order for us. It will connect to the MongoDB repository, it will order a beer, and it will tell us what to build. So if we open up MongoDB Compass again, so we can view the stuff, we do an update, we should see DDD has appeared, the customer has appeared, and the customer has been added to our database, which is amazing. I'm just going to clean up the database. I no longer need it. And I mean, then again, if I decide I want to use an in-memory instead, I could easily just go with the memory customer repository instead. I can execute the program again, and everything will just keep working. But I have drastically changed what is working. And this is really useful. Really useful. This is it for me and this DDD or domain-driven design series. As you can see, the structure is a lot more cleaner and a lot more scalable. And I do hope you like this video. You can find the full code on GitHub. I will put a link in the description. So there's still a lot more to learn about domain-driven design. This only touches about on the basic topics and how to structure that. There's CQRS, event sourcing, all those stuffs, but we will cover that in the future. And as always, feel free to reach out to me on any of my social media handles, on the comments here. And if you like this, feel free to like and subscribe. If you hated it, leave feedback, flame me, torch me, anything. I hope to hear from you guys. Bye.